All right, fantastic. So again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. We are joined today by some wonderful presenters. We have three panelists with us for our Breaking Barriers career chat, and it's just really exciting to be talking about how to develop these career strategies for diverse identities. I really wanted to cover this because of some of the latest issues that have been happening throughout different diverse communities, but especially because of this month is LGBTQ plus History Month. And so this ties in with some of the things that have just been happening lately in the workforce. So before we dive into the discussion, let me introduce you to our panelists really quick. So first off, we have Dr. Lindsay Bailey. She is the Director for Strategic Technology Initiatives for a nice long title here, Division of Student Engagement and Success. She also serves as the co-chair for UNG's LGBTQIA plus support network, previously known as Safe Zone, which is a program that provides training to faculty and staff to learn how to better support the LGBTQIA plus community. She's a member of the Student Engagement and Success Leadership Team, and in her role, she manages technology systems utilized by the division to support student success. So she's the guru behind a lot of our technology, making sure we stay up and running, so that way nothing breaks down. So she joined UNG in 2011. And prior to this, she served as the Director of Student Involvement on UNG's Oconee campus. And she currently holds a PhD in College Student Affairs Administration from the University of Georgia. So thank you, Dr. Bailey, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next we have Jessi Marquardt, and she is our employer person on the panel. So she is talking from the employer's perspective. She's a recruiter or talent acquisition manager for Enterprise Mobility. She attended the University of Central Missouri as a first-generation college student. She started off thinking she was going to go into public relations, but once she got into it, she realized that wasn't quite for her. And that's okay. As we say in career services, your first job out of college may not be your last job, which is very true. So she decided that she'd move on to Enterprise. And after talking to a recruiter, she went through the interview panel process and absolutely fell in love with Enterprise. So in 2004, she started with Enterprise and realized that that's where her people were. And then she moved on to Boston, and she had the opportunity to join the talent acquisition team and hire for the downtown Boston Logan Airport. And after 13 years, I can't believe you've survived 13 years in Boston. That's so cold. It's just too cold. Jessi was promoted to Atlanta to continue to hire the next generation of leaders. And so she attends, I think, pretty much almost all of our career fairs and career events. So Jessi loves hiring UNG students. And so, of course, obviously, last but not least is Dr. Jeffrey Lentz. Dr. Lentz is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Medicine, Division in Geriatrics and Gerontology at Emory University School of Medicine. He has a part-time teaching appointment at the University of North Georgia, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, University of Louisiana Monroe, and post-university. You are just all over the place. Basically, he's a very busy person. So thank you so much for taking your time to be here. Dr. Lentz earned his PhD in sociology from Georgia State University in 2021, his master's degree in sociology from Southern Connecticut State University, and his bachelor's in human services from Post University. In addition, he holds 2 graduate certificates in gerontology from Georgia State University and counseling from Post University. So definitely some amazing people here with us today, have some really cool stuff to talk about. And let's just go ahead and kick it right off. So, like I said, a lot of this kind of came to me when we were trying to brainstorm, what are we going to be talking about, in different parts of a semester. And, again, October is LGBTQ plus History Month. And so then it's like, okay, well, what's going on in this kind of demographic and what's happening? And unfortunately, we've been seeing things kind of sliding backwards, companies withdrawing from their DEI programs and just kind of saying, yeah, we're not going to be doing this publicly anymore. And so that got me to thinking about, well, when people are working there, well, how does that affect them? And so Jessi, as the employer, I'm going to start with you. And I was wondering if you could tell me from an employer's perspective, what is it about enterprise mobility that, your company, truly embraces an inclusive environment? And, what can students be looking for when they're looking for employers that do that?
Sure. So kind of I wanted to give a little bit of my background again, just a little bit. So I did graduate with a public relations degree in Arizona or Missouri, moved out to Arizona, and I got a job in my field in PR. And I didn't like it mostly because I was in a little cube in an office environment. And like you said, that was 21 years ago. So I had 1,000,000,000% more energy than I have today. And I walked into that office with so much energy and just like, good morning, hello, hello, how are you? And everybody just looked at me like, oh my gosh, like, what's wrong with this girl? Why is she so excited to be at work every day? And I knew I gave it 6 months. I really did. I was like, okay, let me try. Because before that, I always had jobs in college where I was working in a restaurant as a server. I always had jobs where I was like moving around a lot. So to go from moving around all the time to sitting down in one place for 8 hours just was pure torture for me. So I did put my resume online. A headhunter reached out to me. They said, hey, how would you like to work for this amazing company? You can make a whole lot of money and get a free car. And I was like, who is it with? And they said Enterprise. And I was like, no, I didn't go to college to write cars. I'm not interested. No, thank you. And they just kept calling me over and over and over and over. And then finally, I think it was the seventh try where I was like, all right, let me check it out. Let me see what it's all about. And I did. And I'm telling you this story because I joined and within my first week, I absolutely fell in love with the people that I was working with. And automatically right away, I could tell on my very first day of work that I didn't have to be someone that I wasn't. I didn't have to, be like lower my energy because everyone else's energy was low. I could actually come in every single day, be who I was, and everybody absolutely embracing that and wanting more of that in the office. And every single office that I went to after that, Arizona, Boston, Atlanta, like it was always like that. And I appreciate that. So saying that, giving you that backstory, that's one of the biggest reasons why I've been here for over 20 years is because of that inclusivity. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, it is embraced here with this company, and we want more and more people like that because that's what makes our company what it is. I mean, we are people. We want to sit there and talk to each other constantly. The more stories you have, the more experiences you have. That's what we love to see.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and Dr. Lentz, I'm going to come to you now. Thinking about, the other piece of this discussion also that I wanted to cover is, not only the LGBTQ plus, but the intersectionality of other identities, right? Because when you think about, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's also thinking about, okay, what if you have multiple layers of, identities, right? So if your race or your religion or something else piled on top of this, and then thinking about how do you navigate that in your career. So how would you say that like the intersectional identities, whether again, race, ethnicity, disability, impact some of the career experiences for those that identify LGBTQ plus?
It definitely can, depending on the institution you're working for. So at Emory, Emory's big on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, like sometimes some people are DEI fatigued, but it's very important to continuously learn new information. I learn new information about our group all the time, every day. There's something new to learn. And I like encourage, students and future employers and employees to definitely explore different aspects of every not every possible intersection, but every kind of like different group, because every group has their challenges. Some groups have more challenges than others, depending on how many different identities you identify with. But yeah, at Emory, we have various group. So we have Emory Emory, Emory. I'm trying to think of the acronym. There's so many acronyms. EPEN, Emory Pride Employee Network, and we have EBEN, Emory Black Employee Network, and we have one for vets, and we have one. I think one's going to be forming for a couple other racial identities, but there are different. Like everyone can join the groups because you're not just siloed to just one identity, because everyone has multiple identities. That's just how it is. So we have different groups here at the institutional level. We have different groups at the school, like the School of Medicine has an LGBTQI affinity group. The Department of Medicine has their own as well. Let's see. But yeah, so having different intersectional identities does come with different experiences for different people, depending on where they are. So like I'm at Emory. I taught at UNG Gainesville for 7 years as a lecturer prior to my move to Emory. Definitely, I was a little bit more open. Like I put feelers out first. I just not got to come out off the bat. But when I taught at Coney, I was a little bit more reserved because it's a little bit more of like a conservative area, in my opinion, than that one summer I did, and definitely would not be out at Dahlonega. Right, different areas, Atlanta, you have like ITP and OTP inside the perimeter, outside the perimeter. That's one of the things that I learned first when I moved down here. Learning the areas and learning who you could kind of like connect with, who you can come out with. When I do my DEI trainings centered on LGBT older adults, I usually talk about the pride pins, like wearing that on your lanyard or your name badge, or having a pride flag in your office. There's the green zone. I know UNG does green zone training, being an advocate that way. I don't know. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, perfect. And so Dr. Bailey, obviously moving to you, especially since you would you would help teach like you said, was formerly known as the Safe Zone training, which is now the LGBTQIA plus support network. Especially when you're doing this training, what are some of the things that you're helping students to understand, and faculty and staff, and what are some of the things that you're hearing in terms of, again, just the multiple identities that, people may, like, Dr. Lentz saying, hey, sometimes I kept some of my personality and some of who I am to myself, and some of the times where I was able to be more authentic. And so how do you feel that plays out in terms of someone's career strategy and where they may want to go in their career, especially with the kind of training that you do?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how Dr. Lentz brought up the different campuses of like it is very different of how out you can be on which campus. So I felt much more comfortable being out in Oconee than I do here in Dahlonega, but Gainesville is probably the most welcoming campus. So yeah, it's so interesting. So I would say yeah, place makes such a big difference, and that's a hard thing to know before you start a job somewhere. I feel like it's becoming easier with Reddit and other things. I feel like Reddit's a really good tool to use in these cases of getting kind of an accurate feedback of what a place actually looks like to work at. Because you want to be your authentic self. That's the word that comes up the most, and I know a few of us have said it already. If it's just that increases sense of belonging at your workplace, and that's going to make you happier. And but as for intersecting identities, I'm also glad, Dr. Lentz, you brought up like affinity groups that you have at Emory. That's something I wish that UNG had. We kind of have it to a small degree. It's something we keep trying to get going. I've tried to get the queer network kind of built up, but it sort of has floundered in the past year or two. It's just not well supported by the institution, which can be difficult. It's hard to say. It's like they want to be supportive, but then they're not really. Not to badmouth UNG, they're wonderful, and I love my paycheck. But with the affinity groups, I was going to say something with that, in terms of intersecting identities, which also, kind of side note, the queer population has a higher instance of neurodivergence
Hmm.
than the straight population does. So
Hmm.
that's an interesting intersecting identity that plays out a lot, especially with the students I work with here. It's very much like a queer neurodivergent group that hangs out in my office is in the Multicultural Student Association suite. So it's fun to see the students interact here. But with affinity groups, you know, you often have to like sort of pick one, though it sounds like you have to you can go to multiple with Dr. Lentz, but often people feel forced to maybe just pick one identity to stick with, depending on situation. But I think often of like, if you're, say, a gay Black man, and want to be a part of like the queer affinity group, that can be more difficult because it's usually a very white space. So it might not seem as welcoming and you might not see yourself represented as much. So they might stick to more of the racial affinity group instead, and it sort of cuts that off. So just sort of some thoughts and interesting dynamics that come about because of intersecting identities and kind of where you work. I don't know if I answered the question at all, but
Yeah, y'all are doing great. You're doing great. And I mean, these are complicated issues, right? And there is a lot of, well, it depends. It depends on the support you have around you, depends on your colleagues. Even if management says one thing, but what about the person who's sitting in the office right next to you?
exactly.
That, you know, there's a lot that comes into play here, which is what makes it so complicated. And for our students going into the workforce, trying to navigate all of that and trying to figure all of that out makes it really challenging. And so, Dr. Lentz, I'm going to go back to you, and then I'll go back to Dr. Bailey. And don't worry, Jessi, I'll ask another question of you in just a second. But what Dr. Bailey had mentioned about you're trying to get things going at a certain location, you know, trying to get a community on board, that does make me think about, you know, the systematic biases that you might have in like a hiring or a promotion process. And how do you feel that really affects the LGBTQ, you know, plus individuals, particularly those from other marginalized communities? Is that something that you've researched or personally experienced or seen others experience? You know, what are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I am working on a paper right now about special populations in assisted living and how special populations are starting to increase in assisted living. And this is like LGBTQI older adults. These are older adults living with HIV, primarily racial and ethnic minorities living with HIV in assisted living. LGBTQ plus older adults with dementia. That's a very significant concern. Yeah, so like one of the participants, I was reading their transcript, and right, they had a very bad upbringing because they grew up in the South. Even though he's white and privileged, he still had to deal with homophobia his whole his younger life. And ended up becoming a pastor, which sometimes still plays in my head weird. Like he was, even though it's not part of working employment, but I'll get to that point in a second. He had almost had a hard time coming out. He came out to two people, his two best girlfriends in there, but then the third person, he was worried that she would react weird. But then they hear a lot of and this is in Atlanta, a home in Atlanta. Then you would hear homophobic talk from other residents. There's no training older adults, especially if you're in dementia, if you're a racist or you're a homophobe, and you have dementia, there's no changing that whatsoever because of the dementia. But he actually did have support from staff. So like he thankfully he had support from staff, a staff member who you know, liked working with him or whatnot. And then the Latina lesbian who had advanced dementia is like working with, and this is an example of having knowledge of diversity, working with someone whose second language is English, right? ESL. When you're advancing in dementia, your second language regresses back to your original language. So she was, starting to speak Spanish. No one at the assisted living community communicate with her because she was speaking Spanish. And it's the same for, people who are French and whatnot, which made it difficult to care for her. So repeat the question. Am I getting to the question?
That's okay. Well, I was just wondering, because of the systematic biases that may be in the hiring or promotion process when you're in the workforce, how does that impact the LGBTQ plus, community, especially, from those that are from the marginalized communities, and how does that impact like their career progression?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, it's a long question.
I haven't experienced that myself as of right now, but I might in the future. I was offered a position in Florida at USF, and because of the governor, I rescinded my offer, and sliding into this role. So like that definitely has a profound effect because I was fighting with my partner and my family about going there. There were safety concerns, and then I'm hearing, queer faculty fleeing Florida because of their anti-gay stance and whatnot. So it definitely does have a profound effect. When you are in a marginalized group, you notice these things on how an employer treats someone who has like maybe a disability, or it could be a physical disability, invisible disability. So like right now I'm at Emory, and my boss is, supportive, and we do participate in the pride parades. And she's very, respectful. I have diabetes, which is considered a disability. So I'm, living with a chronic condition. I'm also, white gay male. So, and then like my office mate, who's an African American female and is very religious, like she doesn't, show any animosity. She's very open with us. She has queer family members as well. So like we, get along a lot. But yeah, so like an employer, we see how employers treat members of diverse groups. And I'm a sociologist by training, so that's what we learn about inequalities through the life course. And that's what I try to impart on my students, so they have kind of diversity training, even though they might not get it.
Yeah, no, yeah. And I think, Dr. Bailey, that's kind of what the training is to help educate, because I think a lot of times, people just are like, well, I'm not really quite sure. What should I say? What should I do? How can I be an ally? And they may not even realize they have any kind of biases that they're kind of tucked in there, and and maybe the way that they were raised kind of made them, have a certain outlook. So thinking about it from the perspective of training staff and faculty, how do you feel that, people can kind of try to fight some of those biases?
Yeah, and I was thinking while Dr. Lentz was talking about that, of just how important that training is, any kind of diversity training for staff, for any workplace. I'd love to hear from Jessi in a minute to know, like, yeah, what kind of diversity training y'all do at Enterprise. But yeah, I've had multiple instances of someone coming up to me afterward saying during the presentation or training of like, I've never even thought about this before. Like, I never even thought about like the LGBTQIA plus community. It just wasn't in my, world. And so it's interesting to get to see someone's eyes opened to a whole new world they hadn't like thought of or, interacted with before. And a big part of my training is to urge people to immerse themselves or to continue their own like self-training and self-discovery and seeking out, I'm blanking on the word, but seeking out other things that they can do to expose themselves to the LGBTQI plus community. I always actually praise TikTok for this, which I know TikTok gets a bad rep
I was
sometimes,
gonna
but
say TikTok, really? It's got something positive? All right.
yeah. Even in my post-training resources, I have like the best, top 10 LGBTQI plus TikTokers to follow. But one, it gives you a great insight and view into someone's world. So you can follow a trans man's world every day, and there are TikTokers who will take you through going through hormone replacement therapy and kind of answering questions and helping to educate people on a broader level. And also I was going to say something else with TikTok as well. Oh, that's also a great way to learn about a workplace environment as well. I know I mentioned Reddit before too. So social media can be your friend in some situations like this. But yeah, just that exposure. I think that's the word I was trying to look for before. Yeah, exposing yourself to communities you're not a part of, communities you're not aware of is just so important. It's just so powerful. So that's one of the main things I try to instill in trainings, and then helping people find those resources.
Right, fantastic. Yeah, and so yeah, Jessi, that brings us to you thinking about in particular with enterprise mobility. Like you had mentioned at the beginning that it's a very inclusive, welcoming environment. And so how would you say that enterprise mobility ensures that those policy address, the unique challenges from the LGBTQ plus employees, especially those that, again, are from different races, ethnicities, and abilities? What are some of the things that enterprise does to make sure it's and not only included, but feel that they belong? I think that belonging aspect is really important as well.
Yeah, and I know that belonging that's tough to do at work, especially now. A lot of people don't put two and two together of belonging and work. It's kind of like personal, but definitely that's another reason why I've been here for so long is that I've met my best friends here my entire life with this company, and it is because we kind of put all of that together. We do have a lot of those ERGs, our employee resource groups, whatever you identify as, you have a group to go to, and we give that to everyone on their very first day of work. And if you want to be in all of the groups, you can be in all of the groups, and every group has different events that we do. I'm a member of the LGBTQ committee that we have here, and right now, of course, it's an incredibly busy month because we're prepping for the parade, and we have, a car, we have a whole bunch of different things. We have a whole booth there with tattoos and all kinds of things, and it's really fun. And they'll bring the entire company in to come and help. So if you want to be in the parade, you can be in the parade. If you want to come to the booth, you can be in the booth. Whatever you want to do, you can do, which is great. We have a whole committee it's called Rise, and it's for our Black History Month. And like I said, if you want to be a part of that, LGBTQ, if you want to be a part of Latinx, whatever you want to do, you can be a part of that group, and you are fully embraced in that. I was going to talk a little bit about the diversity training. We definitely have diversity training that is formal, that happens here in our administration office. But I have to say that more than that, I feel like it's just like a book of what you can and cannot say, what you should do, what you can't do. Like, it's just a very a book answers. More than that, what I've seen in the past that is a lot more helpful is that we do have panels. We'll have panels with everyone from our community in the LGBTQ, from general managers all the way down to entry-level workers that are on that panel and that are asked questions all across the company, that we have panels like that, and everyone's invited. Everyone's able to speak their mind. Whatever they want to talk about, they can do that. So anybody's invited to that. We have very consistent panels like this that we call uncomfortable conversations, where we bring in everyone to ask questions. And it is just that. It is for people to come on board, ask questions that maybe maybe they're an ally, but they have no idea how to ask something or what to say or what not to say. That is the time to do that. And I like those more almost in our formal trainings, because I feel like people are walking away with a lot more information. But those are just some of the things that we do as a company.
No,
I was
that's
gonna say, if you don't mind, I often will call my safe zone trainings how not to be a jerk.
yeah.
Just it's very simple, like things you don't say and
Right, exactly.
don't do, and just very I like giving very practical information. So I'm glad to hear that y'all do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great because I think some of the backlash that we've heard, just kind of at large, right? That it's like, well, now I'm afraid, especially when the Me Too movement got a little bit stronger a few years ago, and well, now men are afraid to be with women, and now we're afraid to do this, and now we're afraid to do that, or whatever the case may be. And I think it's because just as an environment, it needs to be a safe environment for even the people who don't know, hey, is this I mean, I know it sounds kind of jerky, but is it really jerky? I don't know. I hear other people saying it. And I saw it in a movie. So does that make it okay? And whatever the question may be. But I think that having that kind of space where I like the more informal as well, where it can just be a conversation. And then if you just want to listen in because you are still afraid to ask a question, you can still just listen in and still gather some really insightful information. And I always find that to be really beneficial as well. And I think like how Dr. Bailey was saying, just being able to expose yourself to all those other ideas, I think in different backgrounds and perspectives, it does make it for a more open and more belonging kind of sense of belonging, where if we're going to be spending most of our waking hours at work, we gotta like where we are, we gotta like the people we're with. But kind of going on another perspective here, Dr. Lentz, thinking about, if you are in an environment where it may not be as supportive, so can you give us some idea of, some of the mental health impacts, the intersectional discrimination on LGBTQ plus workers, and how workplaces can provide a better level of support, beyond the affinity groups, but, how does that impact your mental health if you're in an environment where you don't feel like you can, because it's sad that you felt in some areas you couldn't be yourself, you couldn't be authentic. And that's just really sad to hear, but I know that's the reality. But think back, how that even impacted your mental health. I mean, you don't have to share every little nitty gritty detail, but but just how that, can be challenging.
Oh, very challenging. Let's like it if you don't have support at work, like studies have shown, increased depression, anxiety, social isolation. Social isolation can lead to depression and anxiety, substance misuse, like all the way down. Yeah, it's very difficult sometimes to navigate different different workplace environments. Even when I'm driving through certain parts of Georgia, I'm like, oh, I need to go real quick. Like I need to go. I think I was leaving graduation one year and I forgot, because it was at 5 o'clock going from Gainesville to Dahlonega. I took the back roads. It's nighttime after it's done. I forgot to reset my ways to take highways back. It was a very scary area to be in. So like, what if if something happened or whatnot? Right, and that takes a toll on your mental health. Like, am I going to be safe? So safety is also a concern in areas where in institutions where you're not supported. As far as like reaching out, I'm sure there's another person like you on the team, may not be on your team, but it might be somewhere else. But there's always some kind of support somewhere. You just might need to dig and look for it. Usually when I teach any subject, I'm like, here, especially with first generation students, I spew out a lot of resources, especially at UNG when I was a lecturer. I'm like, there's a LGBT, and we also have a GSA for faculty and staff. which I get emails from every now and then, which is,
Mhm.
but like someone will overhear you or someone will see you, I hope, and they'll be able to, build a partnership or a friendship or some kind of mentorship type thing. I do look for mentors too who have been in that situation because they can also share, and it doesn't have to be the same exact situation. It could be something different, like a different identity, I guess. But yeah, and not having a supportive environment at work can take a huge toll on your mental health, but also can take a toll on your physical health.
Yeah, and so Dr. Bailey, I mean, kind of the same question there, and I'm sure there are some resources, because I think a lot of times, I mean, luckily there are some positive online, but a lot of times we see a lot, obviously, a lot of the negative online, and that feeds into, poor mental health and things like that, because people are mean. They're just plain mean. And earlier I was reading an article talking about now that the WNBA is getting more popular, so is the hate towards the female players, and of course all the racism that goes with that, and the sexism, and all the evil stuff, which is really sad. Something becomes, really popular, and then it's celebrated, and then, oh, we gotta, make sure we put that down. And so, especially where I think even a few years ago, there seemed to be more progress towards more equality for LGBTQIA plus, different different ethnicities and races and things like that. And then we kind of slid back over the last couple of years. And then I'm just thinking about the toll it takes on your mental health and where you can go for resources for that. So what would you say are some of the impacts, as well as what can someone do about it?
Yeah, and if you look at kind of throughout history, progress is always usually met with backlash, which I'm sure Dr. Lentz could talk about from a sociological perspective. Is an interesting phenomenon, and now we're in the backlash period, which has been detrimental to a lot of LGBTQI plus people's mental health, mine included. It can be just difficult knowing that your workplace, is not as supportive as they once were, and that can really take a toll. And I mean, being told that I had to change my program's name because we couldn't use the word safe zone anymore.
Oh, I thought, we're just changing the name for fun.
I know, right?
I'm
No,
so
we were
sorry.
made to do that. So I feel like that kind of goes along with this conversation of there was a decree from the chancellor that we couldn't use those words anymore, along with a list of other words that were no longer acceptable. Which was, again, just very stressful and infuriating. But yeah, so having to change that program name, although I like the new name, actually, I'm like, oh, this is nice. This is more explicit. Like, it really, it gets straight to the point, but it still hurt where that, from where that was coming from. And it hurt a lot of people we have a whole committee of facilitators, and us having to go through that this recently was pretty rough. So like Dr. Lentz said, yeah, having that support network is so important to mental health in particular. And I was thinking too of just having a supportive supervisor is so important in that way as well, of just, especially with intersecting identities. And I think a lot of, because I deal with chronic illness as well. And so that can be a difficult thing to navigate in the workplace, and just having a good supervisor, which is kind of luck. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to say about that piece, but it was just something I was thinking of when we were all kind of talking. But yeah, finding support and feeling safe. I was thinking too, like, you can't feel a sense of belonging until you feel safe. So if you're not feeling safe at work, reaching out for help in some way, and if there's not, maybe finding somewhere else, which I know is easier said than done. But yeah, the hate can take a really bad toll on mental and physical health.
Yeah. And then thinking, Jessi, in terms of, okay, let's, again, kind of going back to what I was saying at the beginning about how some of these companies have gone back on their DEI programs. And, if you're working in one of those companies or any company that maybe either doesn't have the program or, kind of says, okay, we're going to change what we're doing here. And then that maybe would give certain coworkers, they think they got free rein now to, like you said, Dr. Bailey, be a jerk in the workplace. So Jessi, in terms of, if you're on the job and you were to experience some kind of harassment, what are some steps that, as our students are entering the workforce, into, building their careers, going to launch their careers, what should they do if they were to experience this? Because I think I can tell you there are times where our students, when they intern, and then once they come back from their internship, then they tell us they experience some sort of harassment. And I say, well, now I can't do anything about it. You're already finished with your internship. I mean, there's nothing I could do. But they don't seem to tell us when it's happening. And so I have a feeling that when people are on the job, they kind of do the same thing. They keep quiet, maybe it'll go away. So Jessi, what would you say are some of the steps that, if someone's experiencing harassment on the job, that are some things that they can do, whether that be like formal processes that the company has, or what steps could they take?
Right. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about what Dr. Bailey said about your support and your management team and whether or not they support you and make you feel safe. When I was living in Boston, my regional vice president was a Peruvian gay man, and he was incredible. He was out and he made it a point to make sure, just to let everyone know, not pointing fingers to anyone, just letting everyone know that he was there for anyone that wants to talk to him. And I saw it consistently that people came to him and knew that he was someone that they could honestly talk to. And then he got promoted out to Spain. So now he's out in Spain, but he's still to this day, like he's one of the people on the panels that will always be like, you can reach out to me at any time for anything. So I think it's so important to have, that supportive management team, but also a mentor, whether that be informal or formal. We do have formal mentorship programs here, but we pick anyone. I've had bazillion informal mentors here with this company over the 20 years that I've been here that were always there for me if something went awry. But then, of course, we do have the formal reporting processes. We have a whole ethical and ethics committee that you can go to, whether that be calling, emailing. Our human resource department is out in the workforce, in the branches every single day, talking to every single person. And, being here for over 20 years and working in Boston and Arizona and now Atlanta, I can say that our management team is management for a reason. Every single person in this company, which a lot of people don't know, we all started entry level and then worked our way up. So every single person started, entry level and then are where they are today because of hard work and because they've proven themselves to be genuine and be open and inclusive. Have I seen throughout the years some people that maybe were not ethical? Yeah, of course. Are they still here now? No, they're not. And it's for a reason, because we do have those multiple ways that you can report those type of things, and then we make them go away. That's one thing I can definitely say with confidence, that we have multiple ways that you can report those things.
I like how you said we make them go away. We make sure that is eliminated. Well, we're getting close to the end of our hour, so I do want to end on a more positive note, because at the end of the day, a lot of times we're just like, okay, so what can we do about it? And so how can we make this a better, work environment, and developing, more of a career strategy of how can I navigate all of this? And so, Dr. Lentz, I'll start with you. What are some strategies that, as students are entering the workforce, that they can, whether they identify with, any of these marginal communities or marginalized communities, I mean, or they want to be an ally. What can they do to create more of a supportive environment?
That's a good question. What I did with one employer, I reached out to an LGBT group And I was like, what's the LGBTQ plus life there? Is it supportive, whatnot? Um, this is prior to not being able to say certain words, but like I had a chapter in my intro to social class on LGBT plus individuals. And I actually had a student come to me after class and come out to me and say, as a gay male, like, I appreciate you talking about issues in the LGBTQ community. So just being out, I get not out, depending on the situation, obviously, just being there for your fellow group, I guess you can say. Uh, like I'm like, I hate sitting at my desk. I like going and talking to people. So I'm out. I like being in the community and teaching people about dementia and LGBTQ older adults. But just like I spread the word, I guess, like I'm here if you need me or whatnot. Kind of like would you say your regional vice president type
Mhm.
person? Just being there, just showing that you care. And that, we all have our own issues, but like, and we all have our different experiences. So like, if I can't help you, I probably have someone in my network that could probably help you. So I'll just, spin you, show you to someone else. I think someone reached out to me about something that's not my wheelhouse. So I was like, here, reach out to this person who actually does that research in the LGBTQ plus area. Other strategies, just keep an eye out on read all emails. I don't read all the emails, but they do have like little nuggets in there, like ePen or eBen will send out an email, and there'll be other groups on there as well that will have other events, so you can go and cross-pollinate. Maybe you can do an event together, share ideas. I don't know. I think that's a good list.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And so, Dr. Bailey, what would you say are some ways that folks can be an ally or, create a more supportive environment? Because we talked about, being supportive, but what does that look like exactly?
What I was thinking of with this question, which is a great question, is patience, especially if you're an ally, and in the patience in the sense that someone in the LGBTQ community it might take them a minute to warm up to you as a coworker because of bad experiences they've had previously. So I try to mention this in trainings too, of just, be patient with people in marginalized communities if you're not a part of that community, and don't judge them based on that first interaction, and know that they might be a bit just wary at first of like, I've had a bad experience before with a coworker, and I'm a little, again, scared, a little wary. So yeah, patience is just such a huge thing. And non-verbal communication so in the queer community in general, like symbols are just so important. And I think Dr. Lentz mentioned, pride pins on lanyards. Like, I mean, you can see I got a little rainbow worm behind me. So I try to make sure there's stuff in my office that's that symbolizes things and gives a message of welcoming, and like very particular about what books are on my bookshelf. So so that's something else you can do. Having it's not showing. Is that your
Very
pen?
cute.
Oh, there it is.
A
I see
little
it.
bit, yeah. It keeps disappearing in the mysterious blue. There we go.
Having your pronouns on Zoom shows that, hey, I respect your pronouns. These are mine. You can share yours. It kind of opens that door up for people to share their own pronouns. So sadly, Teams doesn't do this, which is really annoying. But I like that Zoom does. You can add that to it. So yeah, and I also wanted to just point out, I put in the chat the UNG's gender discrimination link for their reporting methods and stuff, because this falls under the gender discrimination kind of stuff that Title IX does. So just as a resource, if you feel like you are being discriminated against, that's where you go.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that. And as you know, we'll let Jessi have the last word. But as Jessi's wrapping up, again, if you've got any questions, you're more than welcome to throw those in the chat or unmute yourself. But you know, we're in our last couple minutes here because I know that our panelists are just a tad busy, and I know our students are just a tad busy with all the billions of things you got to do. It's midterm season, so but Jessi, I you know, just want to wrap it up really quick. And again, you know, thinking about, you know, how could, you know, if, you know, our students, again, going into the workforce and they rise up to be a manager. And I know you mentioned how people are always, you know, there for folks, and, you know, that's one way to, you know, be supportive. But what are some things that you feel like as a company, you know, beyond kind of, you know, the affinity groups, what are some things that, you know, when students are looking and doing their research on a company, what are some things that they should be looking for? And are you okay with them asking about it in an interview?
Of course, definitely. I have to say that, you know, I do about 12 to 14 interviews every single day. When someone asks me about culture, about the people to the team, what does that look like, and go into specifics, I love that because I always tell people that your place of employment is where you're going to spend a lot of your time. You are not just being interviewed, you are interviewing that company as well. Like, you need to make sure that this is a place where you, at first glance, feel like you're going to be able to be yourself, that you are going to feel like you are comfortable there, that you are supported and safe, and that you're going to have fun too. Like, also, you want to be able to have fun at work, and be successful. But, you know, ask those questions. Just because college or a class told you to ask X, Y, and Z questions in an interview doesn't mean you have to. I always tell people in classes, in mock interviews, like, you need to ask questions that you really want to know the answers to. Like, this is your life, you need to ask that. So yeah, when people ask me questions, anything that has to do with our team or our culture or our environment, I 100% love that. So I definitely recommend students to do that. Also, use social media. You know, like Dr. Bailey was saying, Reddit is huge. Our Instagram is ERAC_ATL. We share a lot of everything that we do with our ERG groups. We do so many volunteer events for every single ERG group that we have. We post all of that. We post the Pride Parade. We post everyday promotions. We post just different events that we have, development, trainings. We post all of that. You can do your research. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone on LinkedIn that worked for the company. Ask them questions about it. Be very open and honest about what you want. That's another thing too. You have to look inside yourself and ask yourself, what is it exactly that I want? What am I looking for? And I promise you, you'll be able to find that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate all of your time. I appreciate you being here. I mean, I know I reached out to all of you months and months and months ago. So I really appreciate you, you know, sticking with me over the last few months with my constant reminders. And thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. It's been a fabulous discussion. We could probably go for another few more hours, but alas, we have other things to do today. So thank you so much. And thank you so much to our students that were here as well. Again, we have recorded today's session. I will be putting it on the UNG Career Services YouTube channel, as well as putting it out there on LinkedIn, and also on our Instagram as well. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.